tribesmen dominate. So sad. Okay. Nerima, there's been a proposal to have an office of the leader of opposition. Is this a good idea in your view?
I believe it's a good idea in terms of strengthening democracy. We need to be able to have criticism, because criticism is supposed to be able to build on both sides so that we're able to find compromise. When we have decisions that are being made in a house without another voice, or we've seen governments having shadow parliaments and shadow governments, we tend to find that you get the best out of leadership. Because even within your own workspace, even mine, there are people who hold us accountable, or people who don't necessarily agree with everything that we do. So I believe that it's something that can be beneficial.
Yeah.
It might not be coming at a time that we feel that it is appropriate or necessary, but I believe that it is important for our own democracy and the future of this country.
Wouldn't it double back then to the same conversation about the wage bill?
It would, but you know, statistically, and I know a lot of people are not going to agree with me, the wage bill is not so high. Even when we look at the numbers that we have, Honorable Kimani talked about having 349 representatives for the 50 million. The representatives are few. People's salaries are high in comparison to other countries similar to ours in the region. Yes, the salaries are high. But then when we look at the amount that the government spends or uses and compare it to how much goes to salaries, it is a drop in the ocean. It is. But I believe what Kenyans have an issue with is wastage. It's the waste that we constantly see daily in terms of the amount of monies that go toward luxuries, or the amount of monies that go toward unnecessary trips and meetings is the main concern of Kenyans. Wages are high, too high compared in the region, but then when we look at the overall budget of expenditure when it comes to government, it is not that high. But I do think that what we need to look at is certain positions. I think that there's a bit of redundancy in terms of particular positions in government. I think that even when we have an administration that is focusing on digitization, there are certain roles and positions that will not be very useful to us in the next 5 years, especially when we have access to services and being able to even pay and receive services digitally. And I think that's going to be the future of our country in terms of understanding which roles are necessary, and because of also the high cost of living, but whether people are getting adequate pay for the work that they're doing.
Okay. Kuria, will this leader of opposition office be the panacea to Kenya's problems?
You know, I totally believe that when you look at it objectively, and perhaps part of the reason why it wasn't accepted across the political divide, because there was a perception that this particular office of opposition was being created for an individual. Which begs what I've constantly been saying: when we make laws, let's make them for prosperity. And when this office is created, let us not look at it like it's being created for the Honorable Raila Odinga or Kalonzo Musyoka, or whatever it is, because we make, when a law becomes, when a bill becomes a law, then it affects the country, all of us. And perhaps in the next, after the next general election, perhaps the number 2 in the election could be Wajakoya, and then Wajakoya ends up being the leader of opposition, for example. But what Wako here said is very important. I look forward to one of the things that we had in the old constitution, where when the government, when the minister for finance then was reading the budget for the country, we had alternative budget being read by the opposition. When we had the cabinet, for example, the current cabinet making decisions, we have, for example, what the cabinet that was named before election by, for example, as Mio leader, again making proposals of what would be the alternative. And that's how an economy grows. That's how a country grows. Because nobody is an island of knowledge. We cannot claim that Kenya Kwanza has a solution to all the challenges you're facing as a country. We cannot claim that any of us leaders have all the solutions we have in the country. We need to listen to each other. But how do we do that? We need to listen to each other in a structured way, in a place where that particular opinion actually does matter. Yeah. And the best way to make sure that that counts would be at Parliament. Or through offices that are recognized by our Constitution, so that you have no there's no leeway to not following the advice. For example, if you look at the composition of Parliament and for example, our committees, Parliament in its wisdom, or the drafters of our Constitution, named the oversight committees, the audit committees, for example, the Public Accounts Committee, which has to be headed by a member of Parliament from the opposition side or from the minority side. And the reports that pack tables in Parliament actually form the basis for allocation of funds in the following financial year. It forms, the PAC reports forms the basis for even division of revenue across counties. So the decision of that report that's going to be done by the Honorable John Bandi, CPA John Bandi, is very important. You can't ignore it. So you can't say that we're not going to follow him because he's in opposition. So if then we have more of these constitutional offices, like the office of the leader of opposition, that makes decisions that become binding to government, that makes decisions that have to be followed, that have to be listened to, then we all have to listen to these particular people. So if we, for a second, forget that we're not making this leader of opposition office for an individual, we're doing it for an office holder of whoever is going to be second in command in terms of second in terms of votes collected in the next general election, and empower them to make decisions, empower them to do research, empower them to have a shadow cabinet, empower them to be able to oversight the government correctly, not on the streets, but where their voice shall count and will have to count irrespective of who's going to government. Then we are going to make sure that we accommodate the different views of everyone. And especially because, I repeat, nobody is an island of knowledge. Nobody can claim they have the absolute answer to all the challenges we face as a country. We just needed to listen to each other. Yeah,
Manzo, will this be the solution going forward?
I don't think so. First of all, to have an office of opposition leader, you must change the constitution, and it requires that to go to a referendum. It needs to go back to Kenyans. We have already a system, we have a presidential system, and it is structured with majority and minority. So for you to really now come up, change from majority to minority, from majority to from government to opposition, then it means you must go back to the people through a referendum. And I don't think the idea of office of an opposition leader was brought in good faith. I think it was just a way of President Ruto keeping the minority busy or wandering or dangling a carrot. I don't think it is honest, because I know he firmly does not believe in amending the constitution, and especially through a referendum. He opposed the BBI approach, and what we have seen latest is presidential orders, which actually amend the constitution through the back door. That's what has been happening. So whatever suits the government, they come up with a presidential order. The law on presidential order is already settled by the courts that once you have a presidential order, it means there is a vacuum of a law. And when Parliament makes that law and the President signs it into law, then the presidential order can be withdrawn. And a good example is a position held by Honorable Mudavadi. It is through a presidential order which is actually unconstitutional. But that seems to be the norm of the day. Instead of, amending the constitution and coming up with a proper prime minister or with a different system of government which brings all Kenyans together. The president is a symbol of authority. As soon as he wins elections, he must bring the country together. And must be able to be persuasive enough to hold the country together for prosperity and for the benefit of all citizens.
Yeah, but now there's also another conversation here. Is the former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, involved in any way in the protest of Azimio?
Not at all. But you see, as an individual, as a Kenyan, he has a rights. He has rights under the Constitution. If he wants to demonstrate under Article 37, he can participate in a demonstration. But of late, I've not seen him actively, you know, participating in politics. Of course, he's still the leader of a Jubilee Party, although some coup was sponsored by government in an effort to destabilize Azimio. But I can assure you, as an individual, he still wields a lot of political power. He has a lot of following. For a moment, you know, Kenyan politics are very tribal. Really, who is a leader? He has been the leader of Central Kenya. Has influence really totally died simply because President Ruto became president? I don't think so. The acts against him, you know, stealing his property, you know, state-sponsored stealing, state-sponsored again, crime, you know, burning down his forest, cutting his trees, you know, things like that. And even now, coming up with a law to frustrate his constitutional rights on retirement benefits. In fact, it's really ridiculous.
Gatundu South Member of Parliament Gabriel Kagombe filed a motion in the National Assembly seeking to have Mr. Kenyatta denied his retirement packs for being involved in politics.
Well, a motion is not sufficient. You know, these are new member of parliament. He may need to talk to Kimani here. He needs a bill. Then that bill, if we were to use a majority, it has to go to the president or something like that. But again, also under the constitution, to change that, you need 2/3. And I can assure you, President Ruto cannot amend the constitution at all currently. If it is the one to be amended through parliament, he will not get the 2/3 number. And that's why, for his own goodwill, I like this bipartisan idea, and for better management of the country. There comes a time you need the opposition. There comes a time the government engages the opposition on matters of importance to the nation, so that if you are passing a law which benefits the nation, then you can get the 2/3. For now, he cannot change the constitution. He still doesn't have the number, and despite a very big effort of persuading, or is it by a lot of Azimio people to join his government through the back door.
Yeah. Nerima, what are your thoughts on this? Should the former president just take a sit back from politics?
I don't think he has been that outwardly involved. He hasn't been campaigning and going out and making speeches in public rallies. But I do think that, I mean, he's allowed to do whatever he wants to do. Right now, he has not been voted by anybody, and so he's a citizen, and he has his own free will protected by our very own constitution. And I do feel that a lot that is happening, which I mentioned earlier, is that we're seeing the battle of ego wars. And it's so funny to me. I was speaking with a friend of mine yesterday, and I said, you know, there's always a narrative that we should never have women or in executive leadership, because can you imagine if we had women who are president? They're so emotional and emotive. Countries might not even talk to each other because they're upset with one another. It's interesting that we see men particularly being very emotive and emotional about things, and a lot of the videos and images that we see, it is men at the fore arguing and fighting and being kicked out of houses instead of being able to conversate maturely and with no emotion. So today I'm happy to be able to throw that to the other gender, because it is always thrown to women. So I do think that the president is allowed to do whatever he wants to do, but I do feel that politicians are losing sight. We are seeing battles of, we remember when our president was deputy, there were a lot of occasions where he was treated unfairly, and we were able to see that with the public. Right now, it looks like it's payback time, which is unfortunate. We need to be focusing on other things rather than these back and forth kind of wars, to make sure that he goes through exactly what he went through, is what it begins to look like.
Kuria, what is the problem with having former President Uhuru Kenyatta involved in this conversation? Because there's an entire motion by Gatundu South MP seeking to have Kalonzo and Raila lose their retirement benefits, and former President Uhuru Kenyatta for being involved in politics.
Yeah, you know, Trevor, we have tremendous respect for the former head of state. He did the best he could for the country. He made mistakes like everyone would. the expectations was that once he handed over power to the new president, then he would give room for the new president to execute his mandate as envisioned by our constitution. And we kept speculating, who are the financiers of this man? And it became just a speculation. People were saying, no, it's a former president, he's funding them. In one of the photos during the demonstration, we saw a very nice, huge brown envelope on Raila Odinga's car on the driver's seat. We saw Raila Odinga with security, with radio calls by police. And we're wondering, how is this person able to even access police communication? And unfortunately, our doubts were confirmed when you saw the former head of state come out on the streets to go and have an argument with very junior police officers over the ejection of Jeremiah Kioni as the Secretary General of Jubilee Party, which confirmed all our fears that the sponsor of this Maandamano is none other than the former head of state. The person behind the fake narratives of whistleblower and the numbers that the Honorable Jeremiah Kioni was talking about is actually the former president.
How can you authoritatively say that?
Because he actually came out.
This is also a house of record.
He actually, because the former head of state came out in person. The very first time he came from retirement, apart from when we see him doing the peace talks in Addis Ababa, in Congo, the only other time, apart from when we saw him at Mass in Nyali over, I think, Easter, the only other time we've seen the former head of state come out was when Jeremiah Kioni is being ejected through a legal process as a Secretary General, coming to argue with junior police officer at Jubilee offices. I'm basing it on that. So that means that everything that Jeremiah Kioni was saying about the fake numbers of the election, about what happened, who actually won, about the whistleblower, it actually shows who the salvation was coming from. It shows why the first two demonstrations, to be honest, police were not able to contain them. Why? Because the people leading the demonstration had access to police communication. And they had access to police communication because they were being facilitated by the former head of state who still has very many friends and people he appointed into these particular positions. And you saw a difference of that on Tuesday's demonstrations, because we saw that we were able to contain protesters from accessing CBD. Why? Because once we knew where the leakage of information is and confiscated it, then they did not have access to police communication. So they didn't know how security officers in the CBD were strategically located. And that is how we were able to contain demonstrations the day before yesterday. And that's why now they realize that they are losing on these protesters. So it's really unfortunate. And that's why my good friend, MP for Gatundu South, is saying, fine, if you want to engage in politics, come. Let us engage in politics. But you cannot have your cake and eat it. If you're going to enjoy retirement perks, retire. But you cannot, even in our laws, you cannot continue to be the head of a political party, to be the party leader, after exiting office as a head of state. So and that's the argument that is even used by the National Executive Council for Jubilee, saying that if you see that 6 months after ceasing to be the president, then you cannot be the leader of a political party. Because the essence,
it's beyond 6 months, but still.
Under what law?
Yeah.
And then, anywho, you cannot eat your cake and have it. If you go to retire, you retire. If you still want to be party leader, okay, you still want to be involved in running a political party, because when you're actually running a political party, because remember, these political parties, is our business, because they are actually funded through public funds, through the political parties fund. So if we are funding you with the political parties fund, then we cannot also be paying you your retirement path on the side. So you can't eat your cake and have it.
Right.
So either retire or come here to fanya siasa alafu tungangane kwa uwanja.
Okay, Mans, I'll give you a chance to respond to
Yeah. First of all, I don't think President Uhuru has contravened any law, and up to now, he has not actively, been in politics, although he's the leader of Jubilee Party. The court has not yet determined, and what is happening is an attempted coup, and a lot of show of disrespect to him by young people he actually helped in politics to get to where they are. But since that matter is being sorted by the courts, we'll leave it to the courts to decide who is the real leader of a political party. There's no law which prevents President Uhuru from participating in politics. Former presidents participated in politics. You saw Obama leading the campaign of Joe Biden. I mean, so there's no such law here or in another place where now that I'm a former member of parliament, I can no longer participate in politics. Now, if I become a former president, that I can no longer, be a leader of a political party. Far from it. It's just wishful thinking. And I think he has been respectful to the laws of the land, and he's still free to go to Mandamano if he so wishes, despite, state-sponsored thuggery to his farm and attempted intimidation through his local member of parliament. It will not get anywhere. I can assure you this is an illegal bill or an illegal motion. It's unconstitutional and has no place in the law. And therefore, people's rights must be respected. It is a constitution we got. And remember, President Ruto really opposed this constitution. 80% was said to be good. We have a 20% we should be working on, and these are the proposals which will be going to, referendum. But I know from the days of, BBI, President Ruto is very clear that now he owns this constitution which he had rejected, and will not want it amended by the public at all. He will want to rule with it the way it is. So I think fairness should prevail, and do unto others what you wish to be done to you. Soon President Ruto will not be president.
So you think a referendum is inevitable?
Well, I don't think he will allow it. I don't think, unless he changes his mind, they say a wise man changes his mind. If he changes his mind and embraces referendum, it will really help the country to polish the 20%, which was left during 2010 referendum.
All right, let me bring in some final feedback and then take closing remarks from all my guests here. We're running out of time here. Trevor Mbija at Citizen TV Kenya, use the hashtag Daybreak. Let's bring that up and see what you're saying, and then take closing remarks before we give room for cooking tips that's coming up right after this. So online, this is what you're saying. MC Rumors says, in Kenya, we have leadership problem. The moment politicians are elected to office, they completely forget about the common mwananchi. The current pull and push between Kenya Kwanza and Azimio is all about political egos and selfish interests. Okay? Let's see what else. Babu Michael says, so they humiliate and abuse former President Uhuru, at the same time try by all ways to disorganize his party Jubilee, and they expect him to receive all this lying down like an envelope. They were forcing Mr. Odinga to retire from politics. Now it's Uhuru. Okay? Babu Michael, until that day that political parties will be formed on strong and real policies in this country is when we will also have a real and strong leader with the true ideologies. Parties now are just formed to win elections. Okay? Flavian Mulama says we need to come up with a model akin to how sports leagues are run. The teams playing have no say as to who the referees is. In our political space, that will be fair to the small political parties as well as independent candidates. Lillian says, what major change have the few in parliament and executive government offices done to Kenya, if not just boasting about positions and behaving worse? What Kenya needs is honesty with integrity and servant leadership, not dictatorships or women. Okay? Nerima, closing remarks from you. Where do we go from here as a country? Where should our focus really be as a young person?
Oh, you know my focus. You know my focus. I started with it, I remain with it, the economy and opportunities. But I believe right before the end of the term of former president, we actually wondered what he's going to do. There was a lot of analysis and debates around him retiring at a younger age compared to previous presidents. And so now we are seeing that he is active. Not necessarily wrong, but it's different. It's a different dynamic that we have never experienced. But I also find it fascinating that one individual can rattle an entire administration. So I tend to find it hard to believe. But my closing remarks, we remain focused on the economy of the country for the people of this country who wake up every day to work hard. Is what is of importance for us. Otherwise, at the end of the year, we will have a very disgruntled population that will be very difficult to manage. So manage while you can now.
Okay. Honorable Kuria?
Thank you, Trevor. It was such an interesting conversation we had. And my call is to us leaders across the political divide, and especially to my brothers and sisters from Azimio. We have only one country. We have one country to protect, one country to lead. We only have, most of us have only one citizenship, that is the Kenyan citizenship. Let us make this country work. When you go out there, everyone looks forward to coming to Kenya. When you speak to our brothers and sisters in the Africa region, they see Kenya as a threat because they know we have the potential. We have a very educated young population. We have very enterprising population. We are very educated Kenyans. We are extremely hardworking. We are very optimistic about life. And if only we could just shelve our selfish interest aside, just for the moment, and work for the best of this country, we would have a country that everyone in the world will admire. We voted in a new administration just a few months ago. We are trying to learn the ropes. We are trying to make things work. We are making the first budget. We have not, the budget that we now currently running on was what was approved by the previous regime. The tax laws that we are operating on is what was approved by the previous regime, which actually, unfortunately, was composed more of Azimio side than it was even on Kenya Kwanza side. Give us time to make things work, and we shall get the job done. Okay.
Manzo?
Well, I want to agree with the colleagues that we have one country. This is our country, and we've got to make it work. We have to bring the cost of living down. The cost of living is high because the cost of fuel, petrol, diesel is high. Cost of electricity is high. Electricity and the fuel is what is used in manufacturing. If somebody is, making maize flour, they will either use electricity or diesel. And for that reason, unless you bring the cost of electricity down and the cost of fuel down, which is increased by taxes and other known costs, like the recent increase of cost of electricity was not justifiable. We really must think of a common Kenyan, and the country belongs to Kenyans who are very patient. They are hoping the government will do something, but unfortunately, unless you bring the cost of fuel down and the cost of electricity, the situation will not improve. And therefore, really, I want to urge the current administration, which was there in the previous administration, because we as Azimio, we were never sworn to lead any country that time. The country's president was Uhuru Kenyatta and the deputy was William Ruto. So there not be blame games. Let's build our nation. Let's give hope to Kenyans. Let's not keep on postponing the bringing down of cost of living. And I believe also on the matter of university education, whatever the president has announced, I don't think there has been public participation. There needs to be a debate on that so that we can involve the stakeholders, and those are the university students, so that they can also make a contribution, because they are the ones who are going to consume that, again, another presidential order.
Okay. Thank you so much for making time this morning. Honorable Dan Manzo, Senator from Makueni, Honorable Kuria Kimani, Member of Parliament for Molo, and Nerima Wako Ojiwa, Executive Director, Siasa Place. Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning on the State of the Nation, and thank you for all the feedback that came through. We're taking a quick break here on State of the Nation. When you come back, it's time for Cooking Tips with Chef Bob. All right, see you in just a bit.